I still remember the way the door sounded when it closed behind him. Not a slam, not even a click. Just the quiet final shut of a man who had already made his choice. Adrian didn't look back. He rarely did. The living room smelled of stale coffee and the faint sweetness of lilies that were already beginning to wilt. I had bought them the week before, thinking they might bring life into a house that had grown colder by the day. But flowers don't fix silence, and silence had been living with us longer than I had wanted to admit. He stood in the doorway, tailored suit pressed crisp, his watch gleaming like a knife under the dim light. He didn't look like a husband about to leave his pregnant wife. He looked like a man walking into an appointment, efficient, detached, already elsewhere. "Adrian," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You don't have to do this," he sighed, as though I had interrupted a meeting. "Elena, don't make this harder than it already is." "Harder?" My chest tightened as I shifted against the sofa, one hand instinctively covering the swell of my stomach. Our child kicked as if sensing the storm inside me. "Harder?" My voice rose, trembling between fury and despair. "You're abandoning me." "Abandoning us? Do you even hear yourself?" His eyes, cold and unreadable, met mine. That stare had once charmed investors, seduced crowds, promised me forever. Tonight it was the stare of a stranger. "I'm not abandoning anyone," he said flatly. "I'm choosing the life I was meant to have." The words sliced through me. The life he was meant to have. And what was I? A mistake, a burden? I could hear the clink of his cufflinks as he adjusted them, his every movement polished, rehearsed, inhuman. "You're choosing her, aren't you?" My throat tightened as I forced the words out. "That girl," he didn't deny it. His silence was enough. I felt something inside me break, not a crack, but a shattering, a collapse of the woman I had been. I remembered the night he had slipped a ring onto my finger, whispering that I was his anchor. I remembered the promises of never letting go, the laughter that once filled this very room. All of it evaporated, replaced by the suffocating certainty that I was now disposable. "You'll regret this," I said, but it wasn't a threat. It was a truth spoken from a wound too deep to heal. His jaw tightened. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of doubt, but then he shook it off, the way he always dismissed anything that didn't fit into his plans. "Elena, you'll be fine. You're stronger than you think." The condescension stung worse than the betrayal. He spoke as if he were doing me a favor, as if walking away from his unborn child was some kind of gift of freedom. "You don't even know if it's a boy or girl," I whispered. My voice broke. "You haven't cared enough to ask." His eyes darted toward my stomach, then away, as if the sight of it was an inconvenience. He picked up his briefcase and smoothed his tie. "I'll make sure you're taken care of," he said coldly. "Financially," I laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "Money. That's all I ever was to you, wasn't it? Another investment. And now you've found one with higher returns." He didn't respond. Maybe because it was true. When the door shut behind him, the silence that followed was louder than any argument we had ever had. I sank into the sofa, tears streaming down my face. My hands clutched my belly, desperate to shield the life growing inside me from the man who had just erased us. Inside me the child kicked again, not in protest this time, but in rhythm, as if reminding me, "You're not alone." I pressed my forehead against my knees and let the sobs come, each one tearing through me like glass. That night was long. The hours blurred into shadows that stretched across the walls. I kept expecting to hear his key in the lock, the sound of footsteps returning. But nothing came. Only emptiness. I wandered the house room by room, each corner holding a memory I wanted to burn. The kitchen where he had once danced me around in laughter. The bedroom where promises had turned to betrayal. The hallway where his cologne still lingered, mocking me. By dawn I was numb. I stood at the window watching the city wake. Cars moved like veins of light, people rushing to their lives unaware that mine had collapsed. I touched the glass cold against my palm and whispered to myself, "You have to survive this. For the baby." For hours I repeated it like a prayer. Weeks passed and the reality hardened. Neighbors whispered. Friends avoided eye contact. The society pages were already flashing headlines of Adrian's new companion. A woman half my age, draped in jewels, laughing at his side as though she had won. But I knew what she hadn't learned yet. Adrian didn't love. Adrian acquired, and eventually she would become as disposable as I had. At night, I lay awake with one hand over my stomach, listening to the steady rhythm of 2 heartbeats, mine and my child's. It was the only thing that kept me from shattering completely. I wanted to hate him. God knows I tried, but hate is heavy, and I was already carrying enough. What I found instead was a vow whispered into the dark as tears dried on my cheeks. He may have walked away, but I will not. I will raise this child. I will endure the whispers, the hunger, the loneliness, and one day he will see what he left behind. I thought of the way his eyes had flicked to my stomach before he left. That small, betraying glance told me everything. He knew the child was his, and still he had chosen to run. That knowledge burned inside me, not as pain but as fuel. I would remember it the next time I saw him. I didn't know when that would be. But I knew it would happen, and when it did, I wouldn't be the broken woman on the sofa. I would be something else entirely. That night, before sleep finally dragged me under, I whispered to my unborn child, "You are not unwanted. You are not a mistake. You are mine, and together we will survive this." The house remained silent, but inside me I felt the faintest kick, a response, a promise, and I knew in that moment I was no longer waiting for Adrian to come back. I was preparing for the day he would see me again, and the life he chose to abandon. I wasn't prepared for how quiet hospitals could feel at night. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, pale and merciless, casting shadows on the walls that seemed longer than my body. My screams had already died out, replaced by exhaustion that trembled through every bone. I thought the silence might swallow me whole until I heard it. Not one cry, but two. Two voices breaking through the emptiness. I turned my head, weak and drenched in sweat, and saw the nurse lifting 2 small bundles toward me. Twins, Daniel and Sophia. My heart clenched. "Congratulations, Mama," the nurse whispered gently, placing them in my arms. I stared down at their tiny faces, flushed and squirming. Their fists curled like they were ready to fight the world already. My lips trembled as I whispered their names. Daniel, Sophia, they were mine, all mine. And yet even in that fragile moment of wonder, his shadow filled the room. Adrian should have been here. He should have been the one holding my hand, the one pacing nervously, the one whispering love into our children's ears. But Adrian was somewhere else, probably sipping champagne with her while I bled, cried, and broke into pieces, bringing his children into the world. A flicker of rage seared through my chest. No, these children would not grow up knowing his absence as their curse. They would know me. They would know love. They would know survival. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless days. My apartment was small, 1 bedroom, the rent overdue more often than not. Paint peeled from the walls, and the heater coughed like it was on its last breath. I would sit on the floor with both babies cradled against me, rocking them until my arms ached, whispering lullabies through tears I didn't want them to see. Bills stacked on the counter like silent accusations. Past due notices in red letters screamed louder than their cries some nights. I worked part-time at a bookstore, sneaking moments to feed them in the back room. Terrified I'd lose the job if the manager saw. Still, every time I looked into their eyes, I found strength I didn't know I had. Daniel had Adrian's dark, sharp eyes. Sophia had his smile. It was unbearable and miraculous all at once. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the cracked mirror, both children pressed against me, and I'd whisper to myself, "He doesn't deserve them. He doesn't deserve us." The whispers started early. At the grocery store, women leaned toward each other, glancing at the twins in my cart. "Don't they look like Adrian Hale?" "Yes, but he's remarried." "Can you believe she's still clinging on?" I would grit my teeth, lift my chin, and keep walking. Their words burned, but I refused to let them see me break. One night, after a particularly cruel encounter at the pharmacy, I broke down in front of my friend Marisa. She had stopped by with diapers she'd bought on sale, her smile tired but kind. "Eleanor," she said, brushing a strand of hair from my face, "people are always going to talk. Let them. You're doing this. You're raising them." I laughed bitterly. "Raising them? I can barely keep the lights on." "You're still standing," she said firmly. "That's more than he can say for himself. Money doesn't make a man. Choices do. And he made his." Her words dug deep, but I clung to them. Nighttime was the hardest. Both babies would cry at once, their tiny lungs filling the room with a storm I couldn't silence fast enough. I'd stagger from crib to crib, rocking Daniel in one arm, bouncing Sophia in the other, my back screaming in pain. Sometimes I'd collapse onto the mattress, both of them against my chest, and whisper, "Please, just sleep." But in those dark hours, another voice always crept in, the memory of Adrian's dismissive tone. "You'll be fine. You're stronger than you think." He was right, but not in the way he meant. I wasn't fine. I was drowning, but I was stronger. Because I had to be. One winter morning, with snow piled high against the windows, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of unpaid bills. Daniel and Sophia were in their high chairs, banging spoons against the trays, giggling at each other. I stared at the electricity notice, red letters glaring, final warning. My throat tightened. "Not today," I whispered, ripping the envelope in half. "You won't break us today," Sophia squealed as if in agreement, clapping her little hands. Daniel giggled. For a moment, warmth bloomed inside me. I knelt between them, pressing kisses onto their soft cheeks. "We'll get through this, I promise." Years blurred, but the struggle never ended. I worked odd jobs, waitressing, cleaning, tutoring, anything to keep food on the table. My hands grew rough, my eyes tired, but Daniel and Sophia grew stronger, healthier, brighter every day. They didn't know what I hid from them, the hunger in my stomach when I gave them the last piece of bread, the tears in the bathroom when I counted coins. I swore they never would, and through it all Adrian's name haunted me like a ghost. His face was everywhere, in magazines, on billboards, in glossy spreads of charity galas. The perfect millionaire, the perfect husband. But I knew the truth, and one day so would the world. The turning point came late one night. Both children were finally asleep, their breathing soft and steady. I sat at the window with a candle burning, staring at the city skyline. I whispered into the dark, the vow I had carried since the night he left. "He will never destroy us again." The words were sharp now, no longer broken. "He will never have the power to walk into our lives and shatter us." I pressed my hand against the glass, the city lights flickering against my skin like sparks. "When he sees you, when he sees what he left behind, he won't find the woman he abandoned. He'll find a mother who survived without him, a mother who made sure her children did too." The vow settled inside me, heavy and unshakable. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I was rising. The next morning, Daniel toddled toward me with Sophia close behind, both of them laughing. Their joy filled the room, washing away the shadows of the night before. I lifted them into my arms, burying my face in their hair, breathing them in. "You are my world," I whispered. "And I will never let him take you from me." The truth was, no matter how poor, how exhausted, how broken I felt, Adrian had already lost, because I had them, and they were everything. They say money can hide anything, poverty, betrayal, even truth. For Adrian, it hid rot. On the outside, he was immaculate. The tuxedo always pressed, shoes polished, cufflinks catching chandelier light like tiny stars. His arm draped around Celeste, his new wife, a woman barely 30 whose laughter cut through gala halls like champagne fizz. Together they were the picture-perfect couple, sharp, elegant, enviable. The flashbulbs never saw the way his hand tightened on her wrist when she drifted too far from his side. "Smile." "Celeste," he murmured through clenched teeth as they posed for photographers on the marble staircase of the Hilton ballroom. "I am smiling," she replied, her eyes darting nervously. "Not enough." His lips curved, but his voice stayed flat. "You know what's at stake, at stake. Always at stake." Behind the curtains of wealth, Adrian's empire was straining. Investments turned sour. A construction deal in Dubai had collapsed. Quiet whispers about money laundering circled him like vultures. Yet in the shimmering lights of the gala, he was untouchable, at least for tonight. As the orchestra swelled, Adrian leaned toward Celeste, his smile perfectly angled for the cameras. "Remember," he whispered, "you are here to be my wife, not my distraction." Her lashes flickered. I thought I was both. The remark earned her a sharp squeeze on the arm. She flinched, but the cameras caught only his smile and her diamond necklace glittering against pale skin. Later, when the champagne glasses clinked and laughter blurred into background noise, Celeste slipped into a quieter corner of the ballroom, her fingers trailing along the rim of her glass. Adrian followed, his jaw taut. "What are you doing?" His tone was low, dangerous. "Breathing," she replied. "It's suffocating in there. You think I built all this for you to disappear into corners?" His gaze cut like steel. "You shine when you're with me. Alone you're nothing." Her eyes narrowed just for a second. Then the mask returned. Obedient smile, soft nod. But cracks had formed. From across the room, Adrian spotted a group of investors. His shoulders squared. The predator in him re-emerged. He glided toward them, Celeste trailing dutifully behind, her smile pasted back on. "Adrian Hale," one of them greeted, clapping his shoulder. "The man of the hour." Adrian's grin widened. "Always good to see old friends." The conversation buzzed with talk of profits, projects, promises. Adrian lied smoothly, as if the words cost him nothing. Numbers spun from his mouth like silk, assets exaggerated, partnerships inflated. The investors nodded, dazzled by his confidence. But inside, a different rhythm pounded. Keep them believing. Keep them close. If they walk, everything collapses. He felt Celeste's hand on his arm, her presence anchoring him to the illusion. He leaned down, kissing her temple for the crowd to see. To them it looked like love. To her it felt like a leash. Hours later, when the gala ended and the limousine swallowed them in leather and shadows, silence stretched thick between them. Celeste traced the stem of her empty glass, eyes fixed on the blur of city lights beyond the tinted window. "You enjoy the performance?" Adrian finally asked, loosening his tie. She turned to him, her voice deceptively light. "Which one? Yours or mine?" His smile thinned. "Both, though I'd suggest a little more conviction next time." "Investors notice." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Investors notice, but do you? Do you even see me, Adrian? Or am I just another asset, like your penthouse and your cars?" The question hung heavy. He didn't answer. "Tell me something," she pressed, her tone trembling now. "Do you ever think about her?" His head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. "Who?" "You know who." The name wasn't spoken, but it pulsed between them. Elena. Adrian's jaw clenched, his silence louder than fury. Celeste shook her head, leaning back against the seat. "You do, I see it. Every time your eyes drift, every time someone whispers, she's still there. With her children. Your children." "Enough," his voice was cold steel. "Don't speak of her again." Celeste's lips curved into a small, tragic smile. "Then maybe stop thinking about her." He turned away, staring out the window, but the reflection staring back at him wasn't convincing. His smile, the practiced mask, faltered in the glass. For the first time in years, Adrian wondered if people could see through it. When they returned to the penthouse, Adrian poured himself a glass of scotch. Celeste disappeared into the bedroom, her heels clicking against marble, her silence louder than any accusation. Alone, Adrian leaned against the counter, sipping slowly. The city stretched before him through floor-to-ceiling windows, glittering with light. But all he saw was her, Elena. The way she had looked at him that night, betrayal raw in her eyes, her hand clutching her belly. He had told himself he left to protect his future, to protect his empire. So why did her face haunt him more than any debt collector? The scotch burned his throat, but not enough to wash her away. Somewhere across the city, Elena was tucking his children into bed. Children who bore his eyes, his blood, his legacy. And though he tried to bury it, the truth pressed against his chest like a weight he couldn't shake. He straightened his tie once more, staring at his reflection. The mask slipped back into place, smooth, untouchable, unbreakable. But cracks had a way of widening, and Adrian knew, deep down that one day, the mask would shatter. Airports smell like endings, the faint tang of jet fuel, the stale coffee, the rushed perfume of strangers brushing past. It all carries that same weight. People leaving, people arriving, whole lives crossing in minutes and never touching again. I didn't know he would be there. I didn't know this would be the place where years of silence would end. I only knew I was walking with Daniel and Sophia, their hands in mine, when the world stopped. We had come early. The twins loved airports, loved watching planes taxi across the tarmac. Sophia pressed her face to the glass, her braids brushing her cheek. Daniel pointed at the runway, eyes wide with wonder. "Which one is ours, Mama?" he asked. "The big one," I said softly. "The one that will take us somewhere new." A small smile tugged at my lips. They didn't need to know I couldn't afford luxury flights, that I had saved every coin for this trip. An escape, a fresh start. All they needed was my voice steady and sure. And then, in the middle of gate C-17, I felt it. The weight of eyes. I turned, and there he was, Adrian Hale. My heart stopped. He was exactly as I remembered. Immaculate suit, polished shoes, posture commanding. But his face, it had aged. The arrogance was still there, etched into every line, but so was something else, exhaustion. He froze. His eyes locked not on me, but on them. On the children, Daniel, who had his eyes, Sophia, who carried his smile, and just like that the air shifted. For a moment everything went silent. The announcements, the chatter, the rolling suitcases all faded. It was just us, two halves of a life split long ago, colliding where neither expected. Adrian's lips parted, a flicker of panic breaking through the mask he had worn so long. His briefcase slipped slightly in his hand. "Elena," he breathed, barely audible. I didn't move. I straightened, squeezed my children's hands, and met his gaze. Not with tears, not with pleading, but with calm. With defiance. Adrian. The sound of his name in my mouth after all these years sent a shiver through him. Photographers weren't far. There never were when Adrian traveled. A couple of lenses swung in our direction, curiosity piqued by the man who once never flinched, now standing frozen in the middle of a concourse. The flashes came quickly, and I saw it. The moment fear overtook him. The realization that this wasn't just a private collision. This was exposure. The twins looked between us, confusion furrowing their brows. Daniel tugged my sleeve. "Mamas, who is that man?" My throat tightened. I bent slightly, my eyes never leaving Adrian's. "No one you need to know," I whispered. Adrian flinched as though struck. He stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. "Eleanor, we need to talk." My laugh was quiet, sharp. "He is too late." His eyes darted to the cameras, then back to the twins. His control was slipping, his empire trembling under the weight of two children who looked too much like him. He started. "They're mine," I cut him off. "That's all you need to know." Sophia tilted her head, curiosity dancing in her eyes. "Mama, why is he looking at us like that?" I crouched to meet her gaze, brushing a hand against her cheek. "Because some people only see what they lost when it's too late." Her small nod was enough. When I stood, Adrian's face was pale, his composure unraveling. "Don't do this here," he hissed, stepping closer. "Not in public. Why not?" I asked evenly. "You left me in public. You paraded her in public. Why should I grant you the dignity you never gave me?" His jaw tightened. Behind him, a businessman whispered to his wife, eyes flicking between Adrian and the twins. The resemblance was undeniable. Adrian's empire wasn't cracking. It was splintering. He reached for my arm, but I pulled back, steel in my voice. "Don't touch me." His hand hovered in the air before falling uselessly to his side. "Elena," he whispered, desperation leaking through. "Please, let's go somewhere." "Let me explain." "Explain." I laughed bitterly. "Explain why you chose money over blood. Why you chose her over us. There's nothing left to explain, Adrian. You made your choice." The twins stared at me, their small faces caught between innocence and confusion. My heart ached, but I held my ground. Adrian looked at them again, his mask slipping further. "They're mine." The words barely escaped his lips. I inhaled slowly. "No, Adrian. They're mine. You gave up the right to call them yours the night you walked away." The cameras flashed again. A crowd had gathered now, whispers rippling through the terminal like wildfire. A millionaire frozen, his ex-wife unshaken. Two children who mirrored his face too perfectly to ignore. For once I wasn't humiliated. I wasn't the broken woman he left. I was standing in power, and he knew it. "Boarding for Flight 802 to Lisbon," the gate attendant called. "Our flight." I took Daniel and Sophia's hands again, their small fingers slipping trustingly into mine. Adrian's panic sharpened. "Elena, wait." I turned, my voice steady, final. "You don't own every room you walk into, Adrian. Not anymore. Some doors stay closed," and with that I led my children forward. I could feel his stare burning into my back as we approached the gate, cameras snapping behind us. Each step was a release, a shedding of years of silence, fear, and pain. The twins skipped ahead slightly, laughing as though the moment had been nothing. Children had a way of keeping the world simple, but for Adrian, simplicity was gone. He had seen them. The world had seen him see them. And nothing would ever be the same. As we handed our tickets to the attendant, I allowed myself one last glance. Adrian stood rooted in the concourse, his mask shattered. His new wife was nowhere to be seen, his entourage frozen in useless silence. He looked smaller somehow, like the man I once loved had collapsed into the boy he had always been, afraid. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I boarded the plane with my children, leaving him to drown in the empire he built on lies. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Silence can be louder than screams. After the airport, that silence followed me home. It lingered in the walls, in the corners of my small apartment, in the spaces where laughter from Daniel and Sophia usually drowned out everything else. But now, even their laughter sounded different. Because he had seen them, and they had seen him. Adrian. The first call came that night. I was folding laundry, the twins asleep in their shared room, when my phone buzzed across the counter. Unknown number. I knew before I picked up. Elena. His voice slid through the line, strained, almost desperate. I didn't answer. Elena, please. We need to talk. I hung up. The second call came 10 minutes later. Then another. And another. Until finally I turned the phone off completely. But silence didn't erase him. It only sharpened the memories. I would close my eyes and see that night years ago, the door shutting behind him, the sound so final it broke something inside me. I saw myself curled on the sofa, clutching my stomach, whispering promises to the children who hadn't even taken their first breath. And now, here we were. He wanted to talk, but where had he been when I was begging the landlord not to evict us? Where had he been when Daniel spiked a fever so high I thought I'd lose him? Where had he been when Sophia cried because other children teased her for not having a father at school? He had been sipping champagne, hiding behind tuxedos and masks, and now one encounter at an airport had cracked the mask he thought was unbreakable. The calls didn't stop. They grew, messages piled up on my voicemail. Elena, you're making a mistake. Don't do this to me. At least let me explain. They deserve to know the truth. Each word was a knife, not because I believed them, but because part of me wanted to answer. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to release years of fury into his ear until he shattered. But I didn't, because answering meant opening a door I had locked years ago, and if I opened it, he would walk in and tear everything apart. Marissa was the first to notice the change in me. You're quieter, she said one afternoon, watching me stir a pot of soup I couldn't bring myself to eat. Even for you, I shrugged. I'm fine, she frowned, setting her mug on the table. No, you're not. He called, didn't he? I froze, the wooden spoon heavy in my hand. Her voice softened. Eleanor. I sat down, covering my face with my hands. The tears came before I could stop them. They won't stop. He just keeps calling, like he has the right. Marissa reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. You don't owe him anything, but the children, I whispered. What if he... She squeezed my hand. What if he what? Claims them? Takes them? No, they're yours, Elena. You raised them. He can't erase that. I looked up, meeting her steady gaze. But what if they find out one day? What if someone tells them? Then you tell them first, she said simply. On your terms, not his. That night I lay awake listening to the twins breathe in their sleep. I thought about Marissa's words, about the truth waiting like a shadow I couldn't escape. I thought about Adrian, pacing in some penthouse, terrified that the children he abandoned might now be the ones to unravel him. And for once, I didn't feel powerless, because the truth was mine to hold, mine to reveal or mine to keep. Meanwhile, Adrian wasn't silent. I saw his face on the news the next morning. Reporters speculated about the mysterious woman and twins spotted with him at the airport. The story spread like wildfire. Headlines asking if the millionaire had a secret family, if the children were his. His spokesman denied it, of course. But denial only fueled the fire, and I knew him well enough to see the fear behind his polished statements. He wasn't afraid of losing money. He wasn't afraid of the press. He was afraid of me. Another call came a few nights later. Against my better judgment, I answered, Eleanor. His voice was ragged, urgent. What do you want, Adrian? My tone was ice. I need to see them. You had your chance. You chose not to. His breath hitched. I made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed bitterly. You call walking out on your pregnant wife a mistake? You call abandoning your children, your blood, a mistake? No, Adrian. Mistakes are forgetting anniversaries. Mistakes are missing dinners. What you did was a choice. Silence, then softly. They look like me. I closed my eyes, my chest tightening. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? He didn't answer. I ended the call. The next morning I found Daniel and Sophia on the floor building towers out of mismatched blocks. Sophia looked up at me with her wide smile. Mama, why was that man staring at us at the airport? My heart stilled. Daniel added, he looked sad. I knelt between them, brushing their hair back, forcing my voice to stay steady. Because sometimes people realize too late what they've lost. They accepted the answer. Their innocence unscarred, for now. But I knew the questions would only grow sharper as they grew older. And one day, I'd have to decide how much truth to give them. That evening, Marisa stopped by again. She watched the twins chase each other in the living room, their laughter filling the air. You know what I think? She said quietly. What? You're scared. Not of him, but of what telling the truth might do. You've carried this alone for so long, Elena, but maybe it's not about keeping them safe from Adrian. Maybe it's about keeping you safe from remembering. Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit, because she was right. Every time I thought of exposing him, of revealing the truth, I wasn't just protecting my children. I was protecting myself from reopening wounds that had never really healed. But wounds don't stay closed forever, especially not when the man who caused them was circling again, desperate to reclaim what he had thrown away. I looked at my children, Daniel's dark eyes, Sophia's radiant smile, and I knew the battle wasn't just about them. It was about me, and about whether I would finally let the truth out, or keep it buried until it tore me apart. Courtroom's smell of paper and power. The moment I stepped inside, it all came back. The marble floors that echoed like judgment, the rows of benches filled with strangers who wanted a spectacle, the raised bench where men in black robes decided which stories deserved to be believed. Years ago, I had walked out of here broken, humiliated, crushed by the weight of Adrian's lawyers and the lies he spun with a straight face. Now, I was back, but I wasn't the same woman anymore. The petition had arrived a week earlier, a cold envelope on my doorstep, stamped with the seal of the court. Inside, his demand. Adrian Hale, through his legal team, was requesting DNA testing of Daniel and Sophia, a petition written like I was a stranger. Like the years I had spent raising them meant nothing. Like they were evidence, not children. My hands had shaken as I read the words. My vision blurred with rage, but I signed the response, not because I wanted to, but because refusing would give him more power. He wanted control, and I would not give him that satisfaction. On the morning of the hearing, Daniel and Sophia sat at the kitchen table, their small fingers tracing patterns in their cereal bowls. Why do we have to go with Marisa today? Daniel asked. Because Mama has to be somewhere important, I said, brushing his hair back. Sophia tilted her head. Is it about that man again? My throat tightened. I knelt beside them, choosing my words carefully. It's about making sure the truth is heard. That's all. They accepted it with innocent nods, but their eyes followed me with a seriousness too heavy for children their age. I kissed them both, whispered promises and left. Adrian was already there when I walked into the courtroom. He stood tall, his suit flawless, his expression a mask of calm. But I could see it. The twitch in his jaw, the tightness around his eyes. He was holding on too tightly to the mask, and the cracks were beginning to show. Beside him sat two lawyers, their suits as sharp as knives, their briefcases stuffed with intimidation. My lawyer, a woman named Grace with kind eyes and a voice like steel, leaned toward me as I sat down. Remember, she whispered, he wants you rattled. Don't give him that, I nodded, my hands tightening around the pen I didn't need. The judge entered, robes flowing. Gavel striking wood, case of Hale versus Alvarez, he intoned. Alvarez, my maiden name, a name I had reclaimed after he left, a name that carried no trace of him. Counsel, proceed. Adrian's lead attorney rose, his voice smooth, rehearsed. Your Honor, my client merely seeks clarity. Allegations have been made that Mr. Hale fathered 2 children outside of wedlock. The resemblance is notable. The rumors are damaging. We ask only for the scientific truth, a DNA test to confirm or deny these claims. I felt the words hit me like stones. Merely seeks clarity, as if my children were nothing more than stains to scrub clean from his reputation. Grace stood next. "Your Honor," she began, her tone calm but firm, "my client has raised these children alone for years. She has provided, sacrificed, and endured, without so much as a cent from Mr. Hale. He abandoned her while she was pregnant, and now, when the public begins to notice what has always been obvious, he comes here not to claim them, but to protect his own image." I lifted my chin, breathing through the swell of emotions. The judge studied us both. "Mrs. Alvarez, would you like to address the court?" My heart pounded. For a moment, the years folded in on themselves, and I was back to being the woman who once begged Adrian not to leave. But I swallowed hard, rose slowly, and let the silence gather around me. "I did not ask for this," I said, my voice steady. "I did not ask for his money. I did not ask for his name. All I asked for was to be left in peace, to raise my children without his shadow haunting them. But he couldn't give me that." Adrian shifted, his eyes narrowing. I met his gaze. "He wants clarity. Let him have it. Let the world see what I have always known. My children are not his shame to hide. They are his blood. And they are my strength," the courtroom murmured. I sat back down, my pulse racing. Adrian leaned toward his attorney, whispering furiously. For the first time I saw panic bleed through the mask. Grace touched my arm lightly. "You did well," she murmured. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Tired of fighting battles I never asked for. The judge called for recess. As people shuffled out, Adrian moved toward me, his voice low. "Elena, don't do this. Don't drag them into this circus." I turned, my face inches from his. "You dragged them the moment you filed that petition." His jaw clenched. "I had no choice." "You had a choice years ago," I shot back. "You chose yourself. Remember that when this ends." For a moment his mask cracked completely. I saw the fear, raw and unfiltered. Then it was gone, replaced by the practiced calm, but I had seen it. That night, back home, Daniel climbed into my lap, his small hand resting against my cheek. "Mama?" he asked softly. "Why are people asking about us?" I swallowed, my chest aching. "Because the world is full of people who think they know the truth. But the truth isn't theirs. It's ours." Sophia leaned against my shoulder, her sleepy voice whispering, "As long as we're together." "Yes," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "As long as we're together." I tucked them into bed, kissed their foreheads, and sat by the window long after they fell asleep. The city outside glittered, but all I saw was the shadow of Adrian, desperate to control what he could no longer hide, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the courtroom, because I knew the truth was stronger than his lies, and soon, everyone else would too. The courtroom was colder this time, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the eyes, rows of strangers staring, pens scratching, cameras waiting outside the double doors. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. The millionaire and his ex-wife, the twins, the whispers of scandal, but I wasn't here for them. I was here for Daniel and Sophia, and for myself. Adrian's attorney rose first, his voice as smooth as silk and just as sharp. "Your Honor, what we have here is a woman scorned. Mrs. Alvarez has spent years harboring resentment, waiting for the moment to strike at my client's reputation. She has no career, no assets, no stability of her own. What better way to gain attention than to fabricate claims and cling to the idea that her children are his? Fabricate." The word burned through me. I felt Grace's hand steady on my arm. "Breathe," she mouthed. The judge nodded toward me. "Mrs. Alvarez, please take the stand." I walked forward, each step heavy but deliberate. The bailiff held out the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" "The whole truth and nothing but the truth." "I do." Sitting in the witness chair, I felt the weight of the room press down. Adrian leaned back in his seat, expression calm, like this was another business negotiation. His eyes flicked toward me, cold, assessing. The cross-examination began. "Mrs. Alvarez," the attorney said smoothly, "you claim Mr. Hale abandoned you while pregnant. Yet you never sought financial assistance until now, correct?" I met his gaze. "I never sought it because I didn't want it. I wanted peace." "Peace?" He tilted his head, pretending curiosity. "Or perhaps you wanted leverage. A story to tell when it was most damaging." The murmurs from the gallery rose. My chest tightened, but I forced my voice steady. I wanted to raise my children without being poisoned by his absence. That's all. He circled me with words, every question designed to make me stumble. Is it true you worked odd jobs, often leaving your children with friends? Would you call that stability? I would call it survival. Is it true you once begged your landlord not to evict you? Yes, I said firmly, because I had nowhere else to go. And I still found a way to keep a roof over their heads. My voice shook, but I didn't break. I wouldn't give him that. Then came Adrian's turn. He rose from his chair, smoothing his tie as if he were preparing for a gala. Elena, he said, his voice rich with false calm, do you ever stop to think what this is doing to them? To the children? I stared at him. Every single day. Then why drag them through this circus? Because you dragged them here, Adrian. I didn't file this case, you did. The gallery buzzed again. His jaw tightened. I leaned forward slightly, my voice quiet but cutting. Don't act like a father now when all you've ever been is a stranger. Grace stood, her voice clear. Your Honor, the defense calls for evidence. She laid documents before the judge. Bank statements, offshore accounts, records of luxury purchases made while his businesses reported losses. She spoke of mistresses, affairs disguised as business dinners. Each word chipped away at his mask. This is not about financial support alone, Grace said firmly. This is about a pattern, a man who lies, manipulates, and abandons responsibility. The truth is not hidden in rumors. It is written in numbers, contracts, and the lives he discarded. The judge flipped through the records, his brow furrowing. Adrian shifted in his seat. For the first time, he looked less like a millionaire and more like a man cornered. When Grace finished, she called me back to the stand. Mrs. Alvarez, please tell the court what life has been like raising your children alone. I swallowed hard, my throat raw. It was hard, I admitted. There were nights I didn't know if I could feed them, days I thought I'd collapse from exhaustion. I worked jobs that barely paid for bread. But I never stopped, because they deserved better than abandonment. Better than lies. Tears burned at my eyes, but I kept going. I would look at them while they slept and promise myself that one day they'd know they weren't mistakes. They were miracles, and nothing he did or didn't do could change that. The courtroom was silent. Even the pen stopped scratching. Adrian stood abruptly, his voice rising. Enough. She's twisting this into some sob story. She's trying to destroy me because she couldn't keep me. His mask was gone now. His voice cracked with rage. I turned to him, my voice low but steady. You destroyed yourself, Adrian. You just don't know it yet. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. The gallery erupted into whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras outside would soon be buzzing with headlines. Millionaire Hale loses composure in court. But inside, I felt something shift. For the first time, the courtroom didn't feel like a place where I was crushed. It felt like a place where truth could breathe. That night, after the hearing, I returned home to Daniel and Sophia. They ran to me, their arms wrapping tight around my waist. Did you win, Mama? Sophia asked. I knelt down, brushing her hair back, my eyes soft. It's not about winning or losing. It's about telling the truth. Daniel looked up, his dark eyes searching mine. And the truth is? The truth, I whispered, my voice trembling but proud, is that you are loved, always, no matter what he says. They hugged me tighter, and in that moment I knew, whatever the court decided, Adrian's empire of lies was already collapsing, because truth had a way of surviving, and so did we. The envelope sat heavy in my hands, plain, white, unremarkable. Inside, it was the truth the world had been clawing at. The truth Adrian had tried to bury beneath money, lies, and denial. The DNA results. I traced the edge of the paper, my breath catching. For years I had carried the truth in my bones, in my children's faces, in every sleepless night that proved I was both mother and father. But now it was written in ink, undeniable. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the hallway outside, their voices a low hum through the doors. Investors, acquaintances, strangers, they all wanted a front-row seat to watch Adrian Hale either stand untouchable or collapse. Adrian sat across the room, his suit immaculate as always. But his eyes betrayed him. They darted restless, flickering toward the judge's bench, toward the gallery, toward me. And when they landed on Daniel and Sophia, seated quietly with Marissa in the back row, he flinched. The judge cleared his throat. The court has received the DNA test results. The room held its breath. Fingers dug into the edge of my chair as the judge read. Allowed probability of paternity, 99.97%. Gasps rippled across the room. It was done. Adrian was the father. I didn't look at him right away. I looked at my children. Daniel's dark eyes widened, confusion dancing behind them. Sophia tilted her head, whispering something to Marisa, who held her tight. I smiled gently as if to tell them, "You're safe. Nothing changes. You've always been his blood, but you've always been mine first." Only then did I turn to Adrian. His mask had shattered. The calm detachment he wore like armor was gone. His face was pale, his jaw rigid. His hands gripping the table so tightly his knuckles whitened. The truth had cornered him, and there was no escape. The aftermath came swiftly. By the time we left the courthouse, the air outside was a storm of flashbulbs. "Mr. Hale, do you have a comment? Eleanor, did you hide the children from him? Is this the end of the Hale empire?" Microphones shoved toward us, cameras flashing, voices overlapping. I tightened my grip on Daniel and Sophia's hands, shielding them with my body as we pushed through. "Keep your eyes down," I whispered to them. "Don't let them take your peace." Their fingers curled tighter into mine, trusting me to lead them through the chaos. Behind us, Adrian shoved past reporters, his new wife Celeste trailing a step behind. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight, her diamond earrings catching the flashes like shards of glass. "Celeste, how do you feel about your husband's children?" Someone shouted, her jaw clenched. She said nothing, but her silence was louder than words. That evening the news spread like wildfire. Television anchors dissected every second of the trial. Social media flooded with side-by-side photos of Adrian and the twins, headlines screaming, "Millionaire Hale exposed." Investors began pulling out of his ventures, stock prices dipping overnight. Behind the glossy veneer of his empire, cracks widened into chasms. I watched it all unfold from my living room, the glow of the TV flickering across Daniel and Sophia's curious faces. "Why are they talking about us?" Sophia asked softly. I muted the television and pulled them close. "Because people like stories, but you're not a story. You're my children. That's all that matters." They leaned into me, their warmth grounding me against the storm outside. Meanwhile, Adrian's world was collapsing. At a gala 2 nights later, one he couldn't afford to miss, champagne glasses shattered on marble as whispers followed him through the ballroom. "Those twins. Spitting image. Did you hear the results? 27%. Celeste must be mortified." Celeste stood stiff at his side, her smile frozen, her hand trembling around her clutch. When one guest leaned too close, whispering sympathy, she snapped, "Don't!" Her mask cracked. Her humiliation was public, and Adrian for once couldn't control the room. Grace called me the next morning. "He's unraveling," she said bluntly. "Investors are pulling deals. His marriage is in shambles. He'll fight harder now, Elena. Desperation makes men dangerous," I swallowed. "I don't want his empire. I don't want his money. I just want my children safe. And that's why you're winning," she replied. Her words lingered long after the call ended. Winning. I hadn't thought of it that way. I didn't feel like I was winning. I felt like I was surviving day by day, shielding Daniel and Sophia from the storm Adrian had brought back into our lives. But maybe survival was winning. That night, as I tucked the twins into bed, Daniel looked up at me with solemn eyes. "Mama," he whispered, "is he really our father?" The question sliced through me. I sat beside him, brushing the hair from his forehead. "Yes," I said softly. "He is," Sophia stirred, her sleepy voice joining in. "Then why don't we live with him?" My throat tightened. I chose my words carefully, because being a father isn't just about blood. It's about love and being there every day. And that's what I've done. That's what I'll keep doing. They nodded slowly, their innocence intact but their curiosity blooming. I kissed them both, whispering, "You are not defined by him. You are defined by the love you carry." Don't forget that. The world outside roared with Adrian's downfall. Flashbulbs, betrayals, investors fleeing. But inside my home there was quiet. And for the first time in years I didn't feel small, I felt steady, because the truth was out. His illusions were shattered, and I still had what he could never reclaim: Daniel and Sophia's trust. Later, alone by the window, I watched the city lights flicker like dying stars. Somewhere across town, Adrian was drowning in the empire he built on lies. And for once, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity, because he had everything the world said mattered. Money, power, prestige, but I had everything that truly mattered. And that was enough. Revenge doesn't always arrive with fire. Sometimes it comes in the shape of paper. Court filings, affidavits, stamped petitions that declare finally that the truth can no longer be ignored. I hadn't wanted his money. For years I'd survived without it. But survival wasn't enough anymore. Daniel and Sophia deserved acknowledgement, not just in whispers, not just in resemblance, but in law. So I signed the lawsuit. Child support, damages, recognition, justice. The weeks that followed blurred into strategy sessions. Late at night, after the twins were asleep, I sat across the table from Grace. Stacks of documents between us. Bank statements, corporate records, evidence of shell companies designed to hide his wealth. She spoke in steady, measured tones, highlighting each point like a scalpel cutting into flesh. "He'll try to settle," Grace said. "He'll offer you money to make this disappear." "I don't want his hush money," I whispered, staring at the papers. "I want him to stand there and admit what he's done." She studied me for a long moment. "That's harder than any check we could force him to write." "I know," I said softly. "That's why it matters." Adrian didn't disappoint. 3 days later, a messenger arrived at my door with an envelope, an offer. A number written in cold ink, large enough to make most people's knees buckle. I tore it in half. The next day, his call came. "Elena," he began, his voice softer than I'd heard in years. "You don't have to do this. We can resolve this quietly." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Quiet? You've lived your whole life quieting the truth." "Not this time. Think of the children," he pleaded. "I am," I snapped. "That's why I'm doing this." The silence that followed told me everything. He wasn't thinking of them. He was thinking of himself. The twins, too young to understand the intricacies of court filings, still felt the tension. One night, as I tucked them in, Sophia clutched my hand. "Mama, are we in trouble?" The question sliced through me. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing her hair back. "We're not in trouble. We're telling the truth." "That's never trouble." Daniel's dark eyes searched mine. "But he looked so angry," I swallowed hard. "That's because the truth scares him." "But it won't scare us." They nodded slowly, drifting to sleep, their small faces peaceful. I sat beside them long after, the weight of their innocence pressing heavy on my chest. The final hearing arrived like a storm. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters filled the gallery. Investors hovered, waiting to see if Adrian Hale's empire would survive. He entered with the same polished mask, Celeste trailing 2 steps behind, her smile brittle. But I saw it, the faint sheen of sweat on his brow, the flicker of panic he couldn't quite bury. Grace leaned toward me. "Today we finish this." The proceedings began with numbers. Adrian's attorneys tried to downplay his wealth, painting him as overextended, a victim of bad investments. But Grace countered with precision. Document after document revealed hidden accounts, luxury purchases, private jets billed as business expenses. The judge's expression darkened with each revelation. Then came the testimony. I rose, heart pounding, and spoke of years spent raising children alone, of the bills I couldn't pay, the nights I went hungry so they wouldn't, the milestones he had missed because he chose not to be there. My voice shook, but I didn't break. I looked directly at Adrian. "You left us with nothing, and still we survived. But surviving doesn't erase what you owe to them and to the truth." Adrian finally snapped. "She's exaggerating," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "She's manipulating this court just like she manipulated me." The judge's gavel struck wood. "Mr. Hale, control yourself," but the damage was done. His mask had cracked again, this time in front of everyone who mattered. Celeste shifted uncomfortably beside him, her eyes glassy with humiliation. Grace rose calmly. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. The DNA confirmed paternity. The financial records confirm capacity. What remains is not whether he is the father, it is whether he will be held accountable as one." The words echoed in the chamber. Heavy as a verdict, the judge leaned forward, his voice steady. "Mr. Hale, this court finds you legally responsible for child support and restitution. Payment schedules will be established immediately. The gallery erupted into murmurs. Adrian sank into his chair, pale, defeated. For once there was no spin, no performance, no escape. I closed my eyes, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. Not revenge. Not entirely. Redemption. Outside the courthouse, the cameras swarmed again, but I held my children's hands tightly, shielding them with my body. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward. "Mrs. Alvarez, how do you feel? Do you consider this a victory? Will the children have a relationship with their father now?" I paused, meeting their eager faces, and answered simply, "I consider it justice. And justice isn't mine, it belongs to my children." Daniel squeezed my hand. Sophia looked up at me and smiled, and for the first time, I felt the ground solid beneath my feet. That night, after the storm of cameras and questions, we sat in the living room. The twins curled up beside me under a blanket. The television blared with coverage of Adrian's downfall, his empire collapsing piece by piece. But I turned it off. "Why, Mama?" Daniel asked. "Don't you want to see?" I shook my head, kissing his forehead. "No, baby, because our story isn't about him. It's about us." Sophia snuggled closer, whispering, "We won, didn't we?" I held them both tight, my eyes wet. "Yes," I said softly, "we won, because we're still standing, and nothing can take that away." In the quiet that followed, I realized something. Revenge had brought me here. The need for him to face the truth, to feel the sting of accountability. But redemption was what I carried out of that courtroom. Redemption for the years of silence. Redemption for every tear shed alone. Redemption for my children, who would grow knowing they weren't mistakes, but miracles. And for myself, because I was no longer the woman he had left behind, was the woman who had walked through fire and come out whole. Airports don't feel like endings anymore. They feel like beginnings. The smell of jet fuel, the shuffle of suitcases, the hum of departure boards. Once they reminded me of the night Adrian walked out on us. But now, years later, with Daniel on one side and Sophia on the other, airports mean something else entirely. Freedom. We walked through the terminal as the morning sun spilled through the tall glass windows. Travelers hurried past with coffee cups and tired faces, but I felt no rush. For the first time in years, my steps were steady, light. Daniel's small hand tightened in mine. "Mama, are we going somewhere new again?" "Yes," I said softly, smiling down at him. "Somewhere better." Sophia skipped at my side, her braids bouncing. "Do they have beaches?" "Maybe," I laughed. "Maybe beaches, maybe mountains. But what matters is it's ours." They grinned, their laughter echoing like music across the concourse. I should have expected it. His presence. Airports had always been his stage. Briefcases. Bodyguards, the endless cycle of departures that built his empire. And there he was, standing near a column, watching us, Adrian. But not the Adrian the world used to know. His suit was still tailored, but his posture sagged. His eyes were hollow, ringed with sleeplessness. The man who once commanded rooms now looked like a shadow. His empire fractured, his reputation bruised. His wealth siphoned by lawyers and settlements. Our eyes locked, and I saw it. Regret, raw. Unmasked, gnawing regret. He stepped forward, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Elena." I stopped. But I didn't let go of Daniel and Sophia's hands. Adrian, his gaze flicked to the children. Daniel's dark eyes, Sophia's radiant smile, the proof of everything he had tried to deny. His lips trembled as though words failed him. "They've grown," he whispered. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. "Without you." He flinched. The twins looked up at me, then at him. Daniel tilted his head. "Mama, that's the man from before." "Yes," I said gently. "That's him." Sophia frowned. "Why is he sad?" The question lingered in the air. I didn't answer right away. I looked at Adrian, letting the silence weigh on him. Finally, I said, "Because sometimes people realize too late what they threw away." His shoulders sagged, his mouth opening but no words coming. Daniel squeezed my hand tighter, leaning into me. "We don't need him, do we, Mama?" I knelt, pulling them close, meeting their eyes. "No, we never did. We have each other." Their smiles came like sunshine breaking through clouds. Adrian's voice broke the moment. "Elena, please, just let me talk to them. Let me—" "No," I said sharply. Then softer, "No, Adrian. You had years. You had choices. You don't get to rewrite the story now. His face crumbled. "I've lost everything." I met his gaze, unwavering. "No, you lost us." Everything else was just noise. For a moment he looked like a man on the edge of begging. But then, seeing my children's eyes on him, confused, wary, he stopped. His mouth closed. His hands fell limp at his sides. He understood the door was closed permanently. The announcement for our flight crackled overhead. Boarding for Flight 412, Lisbon. Now boarding passengers with children. I straightened, taking my children's hands again. "Time to go," I whispered. We walked forward. Each step felt like shedding weight I had carried for years. Fear, shame, bitterness. They no longer belonged to me. Behind us, Adrian stood frozen, just as he had that day at the first airport. Only this time I wasn't broken. I was free. At the gate, as the attendant scanned our tickets, Daniel looked back over his shoulder. "He's still there," he murmured. I glanced back one last time. Adrian hadn't moved. He stood rooted to the floor, watching us disappear. His face was pale, empty, like a man staring at the ruins of a house he burned down himself. I turned away. Some stories don't need to be rewritten. Some doors must stay shut. On the plane, the twins pressed their faces to the window as the ground crew moved below. "Are we really starting fresh, Mama?" Sophia asked, her eyes wide. "Yes," I whispered, my chest swelling with something that felt like peace. A real fresh start. No shadows, no lies. Just us. Daniel leaned his head on my arm. "I like that." I kissed the tops of their heads, closing my eyes as the engines roared to life. The plane lifted, breaking through the clouds. Sunlight spilled across our faces, golden and warm. I thought of the years spent in the dark, sleepless nights, unpaid bills, humiliation whispered behind my back. I thought of the courtroom battles, the airport encounters, the cameras flashing like weapons. And then I thought of this moment, the three of us, rising above it all. In the distance, Adrian Hale would return to his penthouse, his empty champagne glasses, his fractured empire. He would replay our words in his head, wishing for a second chance that would never come. Regret would be his only companion. But me, I had everything. 2 small hands in mine, 2 smiles brighter than the sun. 2 futures I would protect with every breath I had. A mother's victory. As the plane cut across the horizon, I whispered a final promise, more to myself than anyone else. "You will never break us again." Daniel stirred, smiling in his sleep. Sophia shifted closer, her small fingers still clutching mine. I leaned back in my seat, tears slipping silently down my cheeks, not of pain, but of release. The past was behind me, the future was ahead, and for the first time I felt whole.